Good morning. Thank you, everybody, for showing up today, prompt, on time, ready to go. It's really fantastic. I will remind you that we're being live streamed, so don't say things you don't want the public to know about, okay? So, just so you know. And I do have my good friend Bernie Dardis here. He always kind of watches over me to see I don't screw up. So, Bernie, if we do anything wrong, just tell me, okay? We did have a session before, and we're really happy to have you here. Elections are over. Proposition 4 went down. I think it's a different day in legislature, what you're going to tackle and what's going to happen. But we wanted to just go through a couple of things that we have of concerns as the city of Fargo, kind of update you on that and get you in tune to what's at us and what our ask might be of you, and you're the state legislative. So we'll just go around and introduce ourselves again. I think you know many of us, but it's just always good to reiterate who's here. So.
Michelle Turnberg, Fargo City Commission.
Dave Pepcorn, Fargo City Commission, and when your microphone has the green light, that means you can talk, and red means it's off. So that, and if you can hold the microphone close to your mouth, that's great.
Austin Shower, District 13, West Fargo. These are pretty fancy Dan microphones. I think the city of Fargo is doing pretty well.
Ron Sarbog, State Senator, District 45.
Andrew Marshall, House Representatives, District 16.
Jim Jonas, District 13, West Fargo, Representative.
Carrie McLeod, Representative, District 45.
Judy Lee, Senator, District 13.
Well, if I get this is fancy. Desiree Morton, District 46, Representative-elect.
Ryan Brownberger, District 10.
Steve Swantek, State Representative, District 10.
Kathy Hogan, State Senator, District 21.
Liz Conmay, State Representative, District 11.
Austin Foss, Representative-elect, District 44. Welcome to our district.
Ben Koppelman, State House, District 16.
Lori Beth Hager, District 21, State Representative.
Jared Hendricks, Representative-elect, District 10.
John Strand, City Commission, Fargo.
Denise Kolpak, City Commission, Fargo.
I had to get that button too. So we have a lot of our staff here today. If there's any questions any legislators have of any of our public works areas or whatever's going on, engineering and inspections, and our whole group is in the back there. So they're available for us if there's any questions you might have specifically about areas that are required. We did have a meeting September 6th, and it was a good start to prepare for the 25th legislative session. And I'm excited to see more legislators here today for our second meeting. Thank you for being here. As we shared in September, Team Fargo will be regularly communicating and connecting with you before, during, and after the 2025 legislative session. Earlier this fall, we talked about issues that related to mental health and unhoused individuals in our community, as well as the transit system. We want to continue these critical discussions, and I'll brief you on the critical infrastructure project in eastern North Dakota, the Red River Valley Water Supply Project. So today's meeting, we'll start with transit update and future funding model. Fargo operates a safe and modern transit system for Fargo, West Fargo, and the region, but it takes a lot of financial resources to make it work for our metro. Transit is a critical service that connects the elderly, new Americans, and other Fargo residents to jobs and economic opportunity. Transit is about workforce and meeting the needs of the employers. As a commission, we just completed our 2025 budget, and I can tell you without a doubt, the transit has become one of the key cost drivers and considerations for our budget, right alongside of police, fire, and public health services. The cost to run a comprehensive transit service is staggering. Our staff has been working with other North Dakota cities to see what we can do to invest in transit services and sustain the critical linkage transit provides to our cities for jobs, healthcare, and services. Susan Thompson, our city's finance director, and Julie Bubbleman, our transit director, will brief you on discussions that have occurred this fall about legislative strategies.
Thank you, Mayor Mahoney. Hello, welcome, good morning. Thank you for joining us here today. We appreciate your service to the community and look forward to working with you on many topics, including transit. Like Mayor Mahoney was saying, I'm Julie Bommelman. I'm the City of Fargo Transit Director. This is Susan Thompson. She's the City of Fargo Finance Director. And of course, we're here with an ask, but we wanted to tell a little story about transit first and just get some information in front of you and kind of help you understand where we're coming from. So one of the things that we're talking about today is it's the state of North Dakota public transportation funding within the state of North Dakota. So we're going to be focusing on urban providers. There's 4 urban providers in the entire state. We've got Minot, Bismarck, Fargo, and Grand Forks. My apologies. And actually, Fargo is the only what is considered a large urban provider as far as federal transit purposes go for definition. So we're the only large urban in the state of North Dakota, but we are working with the other urbans. There's always been a lot of communication and collaboration with all the transit providers in the state. The point we're hoping to help make and have everyone understand is the state of North Dakota does not provide any funding for what we consider general population ridership within public transportation. The formula as it is set up now focuses on elderly and disabled ridership. That formula has not changed for well over 20 years, and that is what's in the Century Code for North Dakota. There is a handout that we provided. It's a larger sheet that should be on each one of your areas there on the table. I don't expect you to read through the entire thing, but it's just a snapshot of where the state of North Dakota is pulling funding from that goes into the state aid bucket that gets distributed to public transit. So it's the State Highway Tax Distribution Fund. 1.5% of that is allocated to public transit. Legacy earnings, 1.5% to public transit. And then the federal gas tax, 4% of that is allocated to public transit. And so that feeds into the state aid formula. And a few more details there that we're providing for you if you're interested in that. So in the form of state aid, how does the actual allocation look for the upcoming biennium? There's estimated collections that they're forecasting of about $9 million from those sources of funding that we just talked about. And half of those will be distributed in 2025, the other half in 2026. The North Dakota DOT is also adding an additional 1.5 million total to that 9 million that will be out of the legacy expenditures, but those dollars are allocated strictly to the rurals. The urbans will not receive any of that portion of the allocation. And again, the amounts are distributed based only on elderly and disabled ridership by agency. So we report quarterly, all the agencies within the state report quarterly. And again, there's no funding coming out of that for the general population ridership. So anybody that's not elderly or disabled. And this is a snapshot of how the calculation is done for the state aid. And there's a few counties that we wanted to demonstrate there. And the calculation, like I was saying in Century Code, is there's a flat rate per county. So every county in the state receives a flat amount. And that's allocated to each of the providers that are within each county. And then there's a formula based on ridership that goes into that as well. And what we wanted to point out about that, and then these are the results of that ridership distribution that's applied to the funding, that portion of the formula. This is what has come out of it. And you can see that the funding is distributed, again, solely on elderly and disabled ridership, but how disproportionate it looks when you're looking at it on a per ride basis as we're moving forward. And it's, when you look at the actual graph itself, at the bottom highlighted in yellow, we're looking at what there is as far as per county. So it's an award by county, like I was saying, and then if you look at the far right column, each county award per elderly and disabled riders. We're not real clear on what the Sheridan County calculation is. It seems to be a bit disproportionate with the others. But if you take your elderly and disabled ridership distribution by county, there's the county that's got the $995 with 44 riders for that year, and a low of $295 per rider for us, Cass County. We fall in the very bottom of what we're receiving out of that distribution. So if you look at it proportionately, and the other urbans are at the bottom as well, there's just not a lot of funding coming our direction from state aid, for state aid purposes. So just a clarification on general ridership, what do we mean by that? Anyone who's not elderly and disabled. So again, it's usually the urban providers that are providing all of those rides. So in 2023, we had about 263,000 elderly and disabled riders, but we also had another 740,000 riders that are considered general public transportation riders. And all of those folks, they're the ones you see on the large buses that are going around the cities in the metro area here. And they're taking those trips to get to a variety of locations. They go to their jobs, education, medical, groceries, churches, any basic needs, and recreation. I mean, they can ride it for whatever they want to ride for to any location. But when you look at the ridership numbers, general population riders are about 3 times the number of elderly and disabled riders that we have. And then just pulling back a little bit and looking at it from kind of 30,000 foot overview, in 2023, Fargo provided a little over 50% of all those general ridership trips within the state of North Dakota. So every county, every other urban, Fargo provided 50%, a little over 50% of those. And we also provided a little over 38% of all the elderly and disabled rides in the state of North Dakota. So we have definitely by far the most riders in the state of North Dakota. And these riders, you may be thinking, okay, well, it's Fargo, it's West Fargo. We're drawn from all over the state. There's folks that are from everywhere that come into our urban areas. And Commissioner Strand put it well the other day when he called it kind of with the melting pots, where we as an urban are receiving citizens and visitors and people that have relocated all within our urban areas. So what we're looking at is these are where some of the opportunities lie for the medical, the education work, that people are taking advantage of. And yet again, we're focusing on the state doesn't support those efforts. So we did include the information in your packet that we were just talking about as far as the slides and the North Dakota funding formula that's in the Century Code. So I'm going to turn it over to Susan.
Thanks. We want to talk about the financial state of transit in Fargo. And while this particular slide is specific to Fargo, know that it's indicative of the other urban transit communities, though perhaps not to this extreme. If you followed the City of Fargo's 2025 budget discussions, transit was a frequent topic. These are our challenges: rising expenses, flat revenue, and significant and growing subsidy for the City of Fargo. Regarding expenses, despite no increases to services provided, and actually bus revenue hours have decreased through efficiencies, expenses associated with public transportation have exploded within the last 8 years, largely through factors out of our control. Bus contract services have doubled. They moved from just under $3 million a year in 2026 to almost $6 million in 2025. Security services contracted quadrupled, and they're now at about $250,000 a year. And of course, energy costs are always rising. And at the same time, overall transit revenues are relatively flat, excluding the middle years for some COVID influx. 2013, our revenues was $3.6 million, and 2024 is estimated at $7.5 million. Due to the size of our population area, now exceeding 250,000 people, Fargo-Moorhead Transit has been reclassified by the Federal Department of Transportation as a large urban UZA. And despite the flashy name, that actually comes with less federal funding. Our federal operating allocation has decreased by $600,000 for fiscal 2025. And state aid through the elderly and disabled apportionment has been flat. American Public Transportation Association, or APTA, reports that within the state of North Dakota, state funding covers 12% of overall public transportation. For Fargo in 2023, state funding was only 6% of our revenues, and historically it's been 7 to 11%. Our neighbor Minnesota provides state aid up to 95% of their local operating funds for urban transportation systems. And as a state, we need to acknowledge that we've grown from fully rural to a combination of rural and urban providers. Fares are only 10% of our revenues, and due to considerations for our low-income riders, fares haven't been adjusted since 2012. But we're also mindful that fare increases can be counterproductive. Studies show that ridership drops with fare increases, so it actually then brings in less fare revenue. But more important, it affects our ridership statistics, which is what we use for federal and state aid. So if you do the math, what increasing expenses and flat revenues mean is that the City of Fargo's subsidy has increased from about $615,000 in 2016 to $5 million in 2024. The gap is the line between the red and the green line. The one balanced year was 2020 with our COVID funding. Fargo can't continue to support transit at this level. We're looking at revenue and expense options, but ultimately decisions will impact services. And this funding gap isn't unique to Fargo. We're hearing the same thing from our colleagues in larger urban providers of Bismarck, Mandan, Grand Forks, and Minot. And funding issues prevail on the national level as well. We've included this slide for your takeaway packet. This is some information we presented at a brown bag for our commissioners this summer. Nationally, transit is facing what they're calling a fiscal cliff and seeking other revenue sources, including more state aid. Okay.
So what are some key takeaways? One thing is to demonstrate what we as urban and rural transit providers are doing is we're a critical service that's out there, but we need support and help from the state. We need them to focus on getting us more funding. That's just as simple as Susan demonstrated. The need is there. And what we're saying, a few stories, and of course I've got many stories about transit, been doing it for a while. But what we're looking at within the county of just Cass alone, there's 4,700 households that don't have vehicles. So it limits their access that they're able to do to just participate within the community and out doing anything that we take for granted if we have our own vehicle. But those households need to figure out how to use the system, and the fact that it's there and it's available for them is extremely important to keep them engaged and allow them to work in the community, go to school, any medical appointments, anything that we, like I said, take for granted that they rely on us to do. It helps with independence, which is very important for people. We talk a lot about aging in place and aging in home. A lot of folks, if they have access to transit, they're not driving anymore. that still allows them to feel that level of independence that's important to them. We encourage, and it's been well proven that there's economic development that can be affiliated with transit. According to APTA, the American Public Transportation Association, for every dollar invested in public transit, $5 is generated in economic returns. And one thing we had started a few years ago, actually it's been a little bit more than a few years ago, was a partnership with Sanford. Everybody here is familiar with Sanford, I'm sure. We have a program with them where they purchase passes for their employees, and those folks ride, they're able to ride the system for any purpose. Generally speaking, they use it just to go to and from work, which helps Sanford with their needs as far as filling their positions that they have for workers. And in 2024, we thought we'd just share with you, up to today, we've had over 12,000 rides just as part of that local program that we participate with Sanford. So we offer that to businesses in the area, and this one is one of the better examples that we're able to provide to you. So.
Okay,
Yep.
my turn.
Turn over to Susan, yeah.
Now for our ask. So we believe, obviously, that there is a need for state of North Dakota funding for general population ridership within the public transportation for the urban providers. Julie, her team, and I have already done some homework. We plan to continue with our sleeves rolled up on this. We've collaborated with counterparts in other urban providers of Bismarck, Minot, and Grand Forks. Our transit team has ideas on how much general ridership funding is needed from the state, how it could be allocated among the urban providers, and how funds could be raised. Some quick math suggests the need for annual general ridership total state funding of between $5 and $8 million. This funding would still leave subsidy responsibility for urban providers, but it does provide some budgetary relief for cities. We floated around ideas for sources of funding, either solely through the DOT or a combination to include other departments involved in transit concerns, commerce for workforce issues, health and human services for social service aspects. So that's where you come in. We need legislative support overall. We need you as a legislative body to acknowledge the importance of public transportation to workforce, education, health and social services, independence and universal access, and generally of quality of life for our community. Please support the transit initiative and share the message with your legislative colleagues. But more specifically, we need some champions to help us craft legislation and sponsor bills. We have urban provider transit teams ready to research and do the heavy lifting, but we really need help to focus our message. We need help vetting options, crafting bill language, promoting the proposal, and navigating the legislative process. So Julie and I provided some handouts, and we're here to visit, get our business cards, and we'd love to talk to all of you.
So Susan, to be clear, you're asking for $5 to $8 million worth of support throughout the state, not just Fargo. It's for all the big
Correct.
metro systems?
Correct.
$5 to $8 million,
Yes.
right?
Yes, that's what the initial proposals show.
And let's be bold.
Would be a
if it-
great start, so we could,
Be bold. If it was $8 million, that would be better.
That would
That
be-
would help most people.
it's always better.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay. I just
Yes,
wanted to
yes.
make sure
Very
the
true.
team knew, because I hate to under ask.
Yes,
Well,
That's per year, I believe, right?
that's per year, yes,
Yes.
per year.
yes.
Thanks.
And I think it's important, if I could just add that piece where the other urbans, we're working with them, and they are garnering support from their legislators as well. So it's not that we're just asking you to step out in front and represent,
Yeah.
so it's the whole statewide effort.
Commissioner Pipcorn and Commissioner Strand just got back from the National League of Cities, and transit was one of the big topics that they talked to right now. That was a big issue out there as well, so.
Yep.
So we're asking states. Oh, I'm done.
Thank you. I just wanted to know, is that 5 to 8 million annual or biennial? And also, what is the rate that people pay to ride the bus in Fargo?
What's the rate, Julie, to ride the bus? And that is annually. That's 5 to 8 million annually.
Correct, yes. The rate for regular adult fare is $1.50 a ride. And if it's someone who's eligible for a discount, so elderly, disabled, it's 75 cents.
And can I follow up? What was the rate maybe like 5 years ago?
It would have been the same.
One more. Thank you, Mayor. And Susan, has this idea been shared with the Highway Department and the governor's budget? Have we done any education with the administrative branch on this issue? And the second question is, do you have a bill drafted yet?
I don't believe our specific concept has been addressed. However, I know transit gets talked about almost every biennium.
And now is the time to do it.
Now's the
with
time to do
The
it.
State Department, and then begin to get the bill draft so that at least the four major entities are unified about a bill draft.
Yes, and no, the bill hasn't been drafted, but we'd love for you to help us draft one.
Senator Judy Lee.
Judy Lee here. The League of Cities, I would think, would be interested in assisting with this as well. So you might check with Matt and see if there is some assistance in that area as well. In what other priorities might be considered, so you don't have to do all the communication with the other urban areas too.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor.
Brian.
Senator Bromberger from District 10. Now that 5 to 8 million per year or 10 to 6 million per biennium, would that improve the services that we have, or is that just to stabilize? Because the reason why I'm asking is because I drive Uber for a living, and I know a lot of people don't use the bus because it's not efficient enough in the cities. And I was really surprised for that number for Sanford because I take a lot of people to Sanford across the metro. So I'm just curious on if that is just to stabilize or if that would actually improve the services and make them more efficient and have more stops per hour, that sort of thing.
Well, clearly it's needed to stabilize, as we talked about, but before we can stabilize it, or before we can look at doing anything beyond that, we do need to stabilize it. We talk about the need in West Fargo. There's currently not a lot of bus routes in West Fargo. We'd certainly like to add some there as well. And that would kind of overall help the entire metro organization. It would give, more organizations to distribute the costs over. But until we kind of get the whole packet stabilized, we can't really look at new services.
Ron Sorwa.
You said 4,700 households don't have a vehicle. Well, first, what's your definition? Is that a family of four in a single house? Is that an individual in an apartment downtown? I'm wondering what you're defining as a household. And I'll add the second question in there. Have you ever reviewed your rates, as a lot of cities do, and base them on income? So you sell your passes based on income, because there's people that choose not to have a car and can more than enough for $1.50 a ride for a day. They could pay a lot more than that. So my question is, have you ever looked at evaluating your rates so they're based on a need base?
Yes.
Which you would sell to the general public?
Yeah, yes, we have looked at that, and we do have programs that assist people. We have what we call our OUT program, so there's agencies that will pay part of a pass. And so we have several options. Veterans that are service-connected, they ride for free. There's different things that we've done to try and assist with those areas and different populations and their needs as well. So we have looked at that and put many things into place to help address that. And when we say $1.50 a ride, that's if you want to get on and pay cash. We have the option where you can buy, for our purposes here, a monthly pass, and you ride unlimited for $42. So yes, you're spot on there with looking at that there are folks that can afford more. As far as household definition, we pulled that statistic from a report that APTA did, and they based that on the census. So when you're reporting information, it can be, a single head of household. It can be married head of household. So it's just how they define it in their stats.
Austin Chow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple questions. First of all, that $5 to $8 million, is that specific for the elderly and disabled ridership, or is that in general?
We're not proposing to make any changes to the elderly and disabled. That's one of the things we want to talk about as part of our bills is what would happen to that then? Would that bucket become just distributed among the rurals, or, would that have to be changed? And then, what was the second part of your question? Sorry.
Well, if the money is directed toward the elderly and disabled, I think we have a pretty good chance of having success. If it's just in general, it's going to run into some issues. I look at, and I don't know this transit system very well, but I look at the model, and I believe you said we can't increase rates because then we decrease ridership, meaning we'll lose federal dollars. And then I see big buses going around and not too many people in them, and I assume smaller buses are used for elderly and disabled. So we have a little bit of a, maybe it's an educational issue, but if we push the idea that we're helping elderly and disabled, we have a much better chance than, generally speaking, we want to help the transit system, even though we aren't advocating more funds for riders or more fare increases for riders.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes, and that was one of the thoughts is if we take this as a separate bucket that's for the urbans and for general ridership, then what's already allocated for elderly and disabled, could be maybe reapportioned to some of the smaller communities for their elderly and disabled. We would certainly need to make sure that whatever we recover, whatever we bring in covers the city's portion of elderly and disabled as well. So we're still looking at different options, and that's where, we need your help. We need questions like this. We're well aware that, this might not receive super optimism from some of the rurals, but, that's where the message is, the melting pot. Like, that's where family and friends from small towns, that's where you end up here because you're going to college, you're moving here because you have access to medical. Like, we're everybody. Fargo's everybody. Bismarck's everybody. Minot's everybody. I know that's a difficult message to get.
Would it make more sense to maybe dabble with the formula as opposed to asking for a $10 to $16 million increase? Because you could get a lot of pushback on that. Have you considered, making some changes with the formula?
We've looked at that as well. Would you like to help us craft the bill too? Because that's a great strategy.
That guy there is on appropriations. Okay. He's the one
right,
we need to talk to.
Okay, thanks.
Madam Compliment.
Thank you. To build on what Senator Sorvag was saying, I looked up what the maximum cap is for a month. It's $42. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm thinking even in the low gas price days of maybe 4 years ago, I don't think most people probably couldn't fill their tank for much less than that. And so for a tank of gas, you can ride all month. And I bet you if we looked at incomes, they've probably gone up 20% in the last 5 years, probably more. And so I think we need to raise the cost to ride. And then if you want to subsidize that for those that can't afford the increased rate, find a way to do that. I think that's where Senator Sorvag was going, rather than saying everyone that can afford it still gets to cap their rate at $42, less than a tank of gas for the whole month.
Thank you. I think we'll move on now, just to see if you have one thing.
Just a quick question. I know a couple of times it's been mentioned that you need our assistance as far as helping draft legislation. I know Senator Lee alluded to the idea of what type of relationship does the city of Fargo have with the League of Cities, the Police Officers Association statewide, all of those, because I know there's a lot of bills that impact all cities. And I think in order to get things to be successful, you really need to look at a collaborative effort of all these areas.
Thank you. Yes, we work closely with the League of Cities.
And that would be, they're there to help and assist as far as drafting legislation. Then you can fine tune it as far as what's applicable to this area. And then federal funding, how much do you receive a year in federal funding? When I looked,
I think it's about $2.5 million.
$2.5 million.
And that's 600,000 less than what we had.
600,000. That number was okay. Thank you.
We are working with the federal partners to see if we can change the formula a little bit, because we got penalized for getting bigger. It doesn't make any sense at all, but we're continuing to work on that. Appreciate all the good ideas. It helps us formulate in our brains what we may have to do on this, but we have to operate more efficiently, basically to allow the city's general fund to focus on public safety and other critical services. I knew a thing about transit that could help us do that, and we appreciate your help this time. The City Commission has also continued its work on several fronts to address unhoused individuals in Fargo. You have recently heard about a private sector initiative led by downtown property owners and businesses to relocate the Downtown Engagement Center. The business community is engaged and, like you, sees the challenge of chronically unhoused individuals in downtown and throughout the metro area. As a city, we invest significant local dollars for the Fargo Cass Public Health to do our part. Susan Thompson can describe the investment and level of effort. Gene Fowle, Director of Fargo Cass Public Health, will provide a brief update along with Brenda Derry, Assistant Administrator, to tell you what's been going on in this area. Thank you.
Good morning and welcome back. To those of you returning, and welcome to Fargo and hearing this maybe for the first time. Just a recap from our September visit. At that time, we were giving you a background on the engagement center, and I'll go through that just briefly and then talk about what we've been doing since that. The idea of relocating the engagement center has been talked about ever since I've been in the position, and it has been desirable from the downtown business sector, but also from the people who are operating out of the engagement center, understanding that we have assumed a space that wasn't particularly designed for us to work within. The engagement center, for background, began as part of a concept from the 2018 Downtown in Focus plan and study that was completed. And at that time, it was still in the development phases and ideology of how it and where it should be. And during the time of COVID, when the downtown current location, Downtown Engagement Center, which is a former police station, became available and COVID dollars became available, for the first time it was actually able to be implemented during the time of COVID. And since that time it has grown and we have completed services, and the numbers that are on the board will show that it has increased in services. So at our engagement center for October, we've had the most visits throughout the course of the year, 3,309 encounters in October alone. The average daily people dropping into the center is 106 for that particular month. And I gave you September's data last time you were here. Unique individuals were 500, which isn't a record, but it is one of our higher months through the course of this past year. We have a mobile outreach program as well that will go out into the homeless camps to provide services to the people who are there. They will also go throughout the community downtown. The mobile outreach did over 270 transports last month. They had 60% of those transports being referrals from the Fargo Police Department. There were transports to the ER, potential dispatch opportunities, meaning if our mobile outreach program didn't go there, it would have been a 911 call for somebody to be transported to somewhere else. In addition to that, over half of their transports were to our withdrawal management unit or to the Clay County resources. So that is something that we've been operating out of the engagement center as well. Another service is our HEART team. It's the Homeless Engagement Assistance Response Team that will go out with backpacks and be in the community and working with the homeless population or others in the streets. If there are needs that are identified in a business, our HEART team will show up and will intervene when necessary, if necessary. And they have relationships. Our teams have relationships with the people that are receiving the services and with the business development people downtown. The HEART team had over 30 calls from downtown businesses and patrons to assist with seeking resources for the people that are in need. And in addition to those, the referrals, they had over 1,500 encounters through their time downtown. Located services that are with us in the engagement center, people who have office space dedicated to them to provide services to the homeless population or those that are at risk of becoming homeless. The Presentation Partners in Housing is located there. Family Health Care has a homeless health clinic that also operates out of the engagement center. And Way of Life, which is an Indigenous case management program, resides in that building as well. Other services that come into the facility to provide care include the North Dakota Brain Injury Network. They do group support there, education and screenings. Rape and Abuse Crisis Center, Southeast Human Service Center, Better Together North Dakota, Deep Roots, Arcos Health, Great Plains Food Bank, Spiritual Healing, the Veterans Administration stops through, Sweet Medicine, and Senka, which also help with working on housing. So again, the engagement center isn't just to serve those that are in need of homeless resources or housing. It is also for those who are housed, who are at risk of becoming homeless. So we work to keep them housed because it's easier to have them sustain housing than to become homeless and then try to get them rehoused, especially if they're going through an eviction service encounter. That would be a mark on their record and potentially make them unhousable again soon. So as we look to a new resource, a new engagement center, we've been working with the Bloomberg Associates to help facilitate this. And as they've been doing this throughout the country and actually around the world, have given us some ideas about what we need. And we've started to fashion how we could best serve the population as well as our partners within the work that's being conducted, and developing how many square feet do we need, designing it, if you will, and then where it should go from its current location. So working with them, we've designed this map, and it's the walkability and resources that have been identified. So within the purple area, the lavender purple, I'm going to say, is the more desirable foot traffic distance in walking. So 13 minutes roughly walking distances to resources. And then on the outer stretch, you have a 25-minute walk. So these going into the pink area is less desirable spaces, but it's ways in which we can get it out of the heart of downtown, but still keeping it somewhat connected to the resources that the population needs. Looking to have a facility that is roughly 30,000 square feet, and that would include still the clinic, still services for the drop-in service providers that come in, and our case management and housing navigation resources. So within this footprint, we've also found real estate that has become available that could be accommodating and would reduce the cost significantly from having to find a property, clear it, or build new. So trying to be mindful to the cost of a relocation and to continue on with service providing. Within the new engagement center, there's been conversations with the Bloomberg Associates and with Chief Cebulski as well about having a deflection justice service system within that, a deflection center, a diversion center, because our jails are full and a lot of the population that we work with, there's been consistent answers or discussion throughout the country of having people put into jail if they are homeless, and that's not necessarily a cost-effective way of doing it, or is it resolving the problem of homelessness? But having somebody be able to go to a deflection center to receive services and get connected is one of our desirable goals. The key elements of a deflection center include the primary goal is basically to avert from the arrest and then to connect them to the services, especially for those non-victim offenses, non-felonies. A very strong overlap with our population that we're working with. It's a quality of life offense. It's not a crime. It's sharing of resources in common areas, making it cost effective. There's mental health, substance use, and sobering services versus having those services performed at a jail at a higher expense. Mental health, strong integration of peer supports, people who have lived experience being part of the support services, shared case management and registry services. And then the stays would be 24 hours or under. And there's higher needs, we could have 24 hours, and there's licensing different standards that we would fall into. Having a direct access to or referral of services if desired with medical, mental health, addiction, and sheltering could be additional options, but we're looking at partnering with others to do more of the sheltering beds or transitional housing beds. In our first conversation, there was added discussion or added beds into the engagement center design. And this would also help for our police department to be able to do that drop off with us at the deflection center versus having them go to the jail, having them do a booking, and having them off the streets for a longer period of time. The Bloomberg Association has done this, really skirting the country, and now we have a spot in Fargo as an engagement center hopeful. And we have, they've had conversations with Chief Zwolski, who is in support of the idea of the deflection center. And they are offering to have a delegation from Fargo go to one of the deflection centers, and potentially that would be Houston. So it is something to be offered to those who are interested to see how it is worked, the operationalization of the flow, if you will, for somebody to be dropped off and then processed and then moved into the services that they ultimately need. That does not include jail. Last time you were here, you were drafting the government, in the Government Services Committee bill, LC 25.3, the bill relating to housing, right? So it's on the slide deck. If you want to click on it, it will take you to the bill and the draft that was proposed. Understanding, and I watched the video for that, and Brenda and I penned a letter to support that bill moving forward, understanding that the resources and the finances could be significant to Fargo in the development of this, and with housing first evidence-based models for finding and working with case management to alleviate the homelessness and housing issues we have. We'll continue to support that bill. Thank you, Representative Koppelman, for chairing that and working to get that through. And we'll continue to look towards funding efforts through grant applications, through HUD and the COC within our state, and then continuing with the private-public partnerships that Mayor Mahoney had referenced earlier. The Bloomberg Group is working with us consistently, and we'll hope to have a final report in January, and we would invite you back to have that discussion with them. We've invited Linda Gibb, who is the deputy mayor, former deputy mayor of New York, and continues to be a Bloomberg associate, who would be here to have those conversations with anybody who is interested. That's all I have.
You haven't said anything. Are you not saying anything today?
Moral support, Mayor.
Oh, I see. I figured that out. I think the police chief, Zwolski, is very keen on this diversion center, basically because of the time, the last time he presented how much time it takes the officers in the field when they pick up somebody who has mental ill issues and can't necessarily take them to jail. I think for most of you understand the jail in the city or in county right now, we're full and we're getting to expand. But the state pen now is shut down. They're not taking transfers. So it's a crisis right now for our community of not having places to put people. So you will hear comments about that as well, in which we may want to talk about addressing the pen issues, but that would help us locally with the county issues that we have. So you will hear stuff about the jail issue in which, you know, we have a person who's a DUI, take them to jail, it's full, they release them, they pick them up 3 hours later driving again. And that just is not safe for our community. Yeah, thank you very much. I'm going to just take time basis, continue on. We will be trying to figure out some things on the engagement center, and basically we're trying to think about how to handle mental health in a sense and addiction issues more than just criminals or different things like that. What can you do in your community to get people off the streets and in places where they need help? The other big project that we have, I'm chair of the Lake Agassiz Water Authority, and I've seen up close, I'm sorry.
Before we end this, I think we should talk about the potential loss of the shelter beds at Churches United for the homeless.
Yes.
Because, I mean, shelter is the crisis shelter beds are in real jeopardy because of the situation at Churches United. Do you want to talk a little bit about what's going on in the community about that?
Okay, be happy to. And we've seen progress we're making on the Missouri River water coming to the Red River Valley. I've asked Dan Portlock, the water utility engineer, and Steve Burrion with Burrion Associates to provide you with a project update. You always got thinking is, when are we going to have drought protection? When is that going to come? But we're into the build now. We're starting to build that. And we have our inlet, we have our outlet, we have continued progress being made on that. And I just want to update you kind of where we're going. Very concerned about getting local people as well, local sponsors in on the project, and we are getting some success there. So we're going to have the team explain what's been going on. Dan, you're ready to go?
Ready to go. Thanks, Mayor Mahoney. So I'm the chair of the Operational Planning Subcommittee for the Red River Valley Water Supply Project and just wanted to share a brief update of the construction progress of the project. So the city of Fargo continues to grow and we serve many of the communities in the area, including the city of West Fargo and Cass Rural Water. We're also serving areas in urbanized Cass, which includes a lot of the cities on this list, which is Horace, Riley's Acres, so a really large metro area. With this project, we planned a significant population projection growth through the year 2075 and looked for a range of projections adjusted with conservative efforts built into it. You know, we didn't want a really large project, the high end of the population projections, and we didn't want to make it too small. So we've had a lot of industrial water use interest in the area right now, including, you know, the Theraldson ethanol plant and also the more recent soybean plant in Castleton. You know, with these industrial interests, we also have, they're also heavy water users, which, you know, such examples are dairy farms or, you know, data centers. So there's a growing need for water in the area, and we foresee that increasing as the project progresses. So as we transition from growing water needs, the existing surface water supplies, you know, will be inadequate during a 1930s style drought. You know, climatologists predict we'll likely have this type of drought by the year 2050, and it could have significant economic impacts, upwards of $39 billion over 10 years. So this is one of the higher priorities for the city of Fargo. It's a significant project. And I have Steve Burrian, who's the lead water supply consultant of the project, and he'll go over a few slides of the construction progress.
Mayor Mahoney, members of the commission, honorable senators and representatives, thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning. The Red River Valley Water Supply Project, as you've heard likely many times, is a twofold project. One, to make sure that we have sufficient water during a severe drought, like Dan alluded to. And then he also indicated that the industries that are poking around in North Dakota are extremely thirsty. Many of them have water demands that will exceed the entire supply of small communities and rural water districts. And so the other element of that is to be prepared from an economic development perspective. As I speak today, we don't have an ask, and so a little bit different from that standpoint. I was asked to really focus only on kind of the positive progress for the project. And what you see here is a slide of the project showing that the current project will draw water out of the McCluskey Canal, and then it will be treated through a biota water treatment plant, and then pumped to break tanks. And if you could see the topography, there's a high spot in the middle of the state, and then from there it drops pretty rapidly, so it'll flow from those break tanks into a discharge structure that will then discharge into the Cheyenne River. It'll flow into Lake Ashtabula. Bald Hill Dam will be regulated, allowing the water to flow through the Cheyenne River up to Fargo at Harwood, and then all the way to the Canadian border. And we'll have the potential to have users draw water off the pipeline, and we'll have the potential for users to draw water off the river as well. I think I got one of my slides out of order here when I got, oh no, I must have deleted one inadvertently. With your support, we've been fortunate that we, from the $180 million that you contributed to the project or appropriated to the project in the 2023 to 2025 biennium, and with the 75-25 match that we need to have, the additional 80 million that we had to come up with, or locally, we have a very generous progress on the project. And so what you can see on this map is all of the phases of the project are either under construction or shovel ready to be under construction or continued design. So to Mayor Mahoney's point, there is a significant amount of progress on the project. And what I'd like to do is, because pictures are usually worth 1,000 words, just go through a few of the construction progress pictures. So contract 5A is a small 1-mile pipeline segment that we did right south of Carrington along Highway 200. This was when we were getting the smaller chunks of money, and it was just decided to build a smaller segment of pipe, given that this is by far the largest pipe that's ever been installed in North Dakota. And so we wanted to give the contractors a sense for how they would go about putting pipeline on the prairie, in the prairie, that's 72-inch steel like you can see in the picture here. That was an $8.4 million contract, and that was completed back in July of 2022 with funding that you provided in a previous biennium. One of the things that we did find on the project is that as these contractors came from across the country for a project of this size, they weren't completely prepared for the amount of water we have on the prairie. And so that was, dewatering has been an ongoing challenge as we've worked with the contractors. If we go to the next segment, so now we're working east from the segment 5A in Foster County away from Carrington. The next chunk was about 9 miles of pipeline with funding that you provided for about $46 million. This is probably the one that got to be the wettest. It was constructed during a very wet period of time, and the contractor has really had to be creative in terms of the way that they look at conveying water from the site. This project will be completed in the spring of 2025 and will be the kind of the first major pipeline segment that we've put in. As we continue further east, now we got hit with a couple things. We got hit with the big inflation that happened in recent years. And then you can see in the parentheses, or in the first bullet there, we also had 3 trenchless class crossings. So that means we either had to go underneath a railroad, we had to go underneath a wetland, we had to go under a highway segment where we couldn't just open trench the project. We had to actually excavate or tunnel under the infrastructure. As a result, that really drives the costs up. So that next segment was about 8 miles of pipe, again 72-inch. But you can see the cost was quite a bit more at $77 million. This project is going very well. It's a new contractor from the southern part of the United States, and we anticipate this segment will be done in the spring of 2026. The last segment actually jumps the other direction. So from 5A, now we're going west of Carrington into Foster and Wells County. Here we had a South Dakota contractor decide that they wanted to get into the game. It was a little bit hard pre-approving them because they were a bit smaller than some of the national firms that were coming from Denver and Texas and other places. But they also had a much better sense for the North Dakota, South Dakota prairie. And so you can see we were able to bid 10 miles of pipe at actually a cheaper cost than you saw on the previous estimate. And these guys are having really good luck putting pipe in the ground. And this 10-mile segment is also anticipated to be installed in 2026. We recently bid segment 6 as well, and that'll be the last of the appropriations that you provided for us for the 2025 legislative session. And probably not a surprise, Carsonson from South Dakota also looks like they'll be the low bidder for that project. Mayor Mahoney?
Commissioner Pipcorn.
So this is for Steve. First of all, I want to thank the legislators for participating in this because this is fantastic infrastructure and it will benefit, unfortunately, long after we're gone is when the benefits will be reaped, but they'll look back and go, you know, they did some smart stuff. So thank you for that. But my question for Steve is, to me, the critical thing is all the small town water ability in the future. And right now, a lot of those small towns aren't participating. And to me, if there was a way that the legislature could help them, because that's the key for them for the future for economic development. And so if there was a scholarship program or whatever you smart guys can figure out, guys and girls, that's the key. I don't know if you agree with that, Steve, but like Jamestown, we just at League of Cities, the Jamestown mayor, they should be participating in this, but it's hard because they're a lot smaller water system. So can you talk a little bit about that? Thank you.
Is that okay, Mayor Mahoney? I guess I told you I wouldn't make an ask, and so we may depart a bit from that. But one of the parallel efforts that we've been doing in addition to construction is making sure we get all of our user participation locked down. And we've gone through just a series of meetings. We've been in some places 3 or 4 times already We've been knocking on the doors of the big cities, the small cities, the rural water districts, and we even have quite a few counties now that are starting to express interest because they realize putting the burden completely on the backs of the rural water districts and their water customers probably isn't fair. So I know Sargent County decided on Tuesday to participate in the project. That would be where like Gwinner is in the southeastern part of the state. And then I was at Dickey County on Tuesday, and we had a really significant interest from them as well. But to Dave's point, or Commissioner Pepcorn, I guess, I would guess you answered both. Notes, we are seeing still many of the really small systems that could benefit from some of the economic development parts of the project that are speculative, worrying about how much the project will cost. And so I know Fargo and Grand Forks are trying to consider internal creative strategies to bring them to the plate. And then there also has been some strategies discussed from time to time on whether the state could try to carry some of the industrial water demand in a bank or something like that. And then when it did come forward, it would be paid for by the customers that benefit from that. So it wouldn't really be a grant in that case. It would be more of a loan or a banking of the industrial demands. And I'm not sure whether that'll get traction in this session.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Steve, I want to ask you a little bit about the criteria on these bids and the contractors. You mentioned that you're using national contractors, especially from the southern part of the United States, and then you are using a South Dakota contractor now, and you're getting very good results. Why aren't we using North Dakota contractors, and what is the criteria involved that we can't use North Dakota contractors?
That's a great question, and I don't specifically work on that aspect of the project, but I know enough to provide an intelligent answer. The problem we have is that when you go to 72-inch welded steel pipe, we just don't have any of that in North Dakota, and none of the pipeline contractors have ever bid anything like that. And when you go to put something like that in, it's really, really important that that get put in appropriately to grade, you know, with it, all the, they actually put the pipe in and then they go inside and weld with a robot on the inside the different segments where some people are using 50-foot sticks and some people are using 25 sticks to put all of that together. And we looked really, really closely at what we thought the qualifications needed to be to do that. And we tried not to make them too onerous, but we also recognized that we needed to have, you know, qualified enough contractors that they could put that in. And as I hinted at, even with these, you know, national contractors that are really good at what they do, they came in and it was still a struggle for them when they hit the various amounts of groundwater and surface water that we have in the Prairie Pothole region. To your concern about North Dakota opportunity, on a job this big, there's still just numerous opportunities for them to subcontract. And so if you were to look at their total, you know, payroll and their total costs that we're paying to them, there are a lot of North Dakota firms benefiting from dirt movement, providing gravel, helping with seeding, helping with restoration, all of those kind of things. But it just, the size of the pipe pushed the project outside of the reach of anybody in North Dakota. With Carstensen, they got close to the pre-qualifications that we set, and because they were very persuasive in how they approached the project, the team re-looked at our requirements, and we decided to lower our standards a little bit to give Carstensen a try. And there was a little bit of risk involved in that, but it's proved to be pretty worthwhile. We have not heard any complaints from North Dakota pipeline contractors on not participating just because of the magnitude of the job.
And part of the rumor too is that if you had a bigger staunches of larger project, you would have bigger companies come in and do it. And that's the difficulty when we're doing these short segments, that sometimes you don't get the advantage of one big company like a P3 project in Fargo. You don't get the advantage of one big developer, Ames Construction, coming in here and kind of doing it. And that is a great question of how we should do that. Ron Sorbach.
Just going back to Commissioner Pepcorn's, there seems to be, first of all, I'll start it out with a disclaimer. Contrary to what most think, North Dakota has finite resources, not infinite. So we can't pay for everybody for everything. And when you talk going to local, I mean, we've already put money into the infrastructure borrowing funds to help local to match their share. The state's doing 75% of the cost of this project, which is abnormal. And if you want it done before 20 years, even to do it in 8 to 10, we're going to have to go out of the Resource Trust Fund, which is extremely difficult because then you're competing with people, all the other projects in the state for money. So we've been very hesitant, and that's been a discussion. How do we need the little ones? Because we need them. We need everybody on board, but we can't pay for it all. We just can't do it. And the Resource Trust Fund, if we're going to go solely dependent on it, this project will take 20 years. It's going to happen, but it's going to take that long to fund it. So that means we're going to have to do some bonding. There's some other things happening at the federal level, but I guess you maybe realize I'm not supportive of giving the locals anymore at this point. We got to take care of our own house and cover our 75% share, and to do it in a rapid way because you want it done in 8 more years. We do not have the resources to do that in a resource trust fund. So don't ask for too much because we will run out of money before we even get started if we do that. And you're seeing the number up there is 1.26. We've been working on 1.3 with inflation built in. Now we're seeing numbers of 1.26 at $24. So that means we're going to be costing us more than has been anticipated. So that's a long about saying, don't ask for too much. We're trying to get the base model done in the state share.
I know we could spend all morning just on the water project, but I'll be very brief. I know that the on the House E&E division, we'll be having the hearings on the water budget this year, beginning in December. It was on the Senate side. Senator Sorvag and I had toured the project on Monday and spent a day there and looking at the project and meeting with the Garrison Diversion, which is overseeing this. You know, Commissioner Pepcorn, I'm more optimistic that we're going to get more entities that are interested in this project. We've heard it on Monday as well. Almost 60% of the population in North Dakota will be impacted by this project. It's not just Fargo. It's not just this area. It's the entire Red River Valley and the significant impact it will have and the needs that are out there because we're fortunate we haven't had a drought, but it can happen anytime. And then that really has an impact even besides industrial. It has it for daily residential use, and that will be significant. Regarding the, I believe the inlet Representative Shower was completed by a company here in West Fargo, and that was a major project right there. So when there is the ability to be able to do that, I know they're very committed to doing that as well. So.
The other good news is Senator Hoeven has a bill that he's advanced federally for us that's worth $450 million, which will help bring down the cost of the project for the state and for the locals. To your point, Dave, is we're trying to help the locals out as well. And that could cut a monthly bill in half for 40%. So that should help the locals jump on board, Commissioner Sorrell.
Just to state, if that happens, it's a game changer. It changes the whole financial model for the state too. So hopefully that can work. And
I'm hopeful that I'll have an answer for you during session, so that would help you guys.
So maybe just continuing on quickly, in addition to all the pipeline progress, when the pipe gets close to the Cheyenne River, we have to have a way to knock the energy down and then let that water flow into the Cheyenne River. So this is a picture of the discharge structure during construction, and this is complete and it's ready for operation. It's right south of Cooperstown and right near the Bible camp there, if anybody knows that from a geographic standpoint. The other thing I just want to touch on briefly is that anytime you put a pipe like this through, a large area of North Dakota, and oftentimes, unlike a rural water pipeline, it's not for the farmers that are right there, it's for many other users across the way. Restoration gets to be a really big deal. And so this is one of the only projects that I'm aware of that actually hired an agronomist to look at how to best take care of the soils as we went through the project. In doing that, we not only strip the topsoil, but we also take the first layer of subsoil and separate that as well, because we know that that can have kind of semi-topsoil benefits as you look at things. And then we have a very prescriptive process for putting that soil back down, and then have a very prescriptive process of working with the landowner to make sure that they get their yields up and running very quickly. So you saw a picture of the soil being stripped. You saw a picture of the subsoil being put back from the segregated pile and compacted slightly. And then this is a picture of where a pipeline before we went in there, when we had the pipe all set out along the way, 150 feet of it. And you can see a year later, after the pipeline was done, what that looks like. And in all honesty, the yields were slightly less than what they saw previous to that. Science says it may take 3 to 4 years, but the landowners were extremely pleased with the process we use in doing that restoration across the central part of North Dakota.
So we want to thank you, the North Dakota legislator, for your vision and support for funding critical water infrastructure for us.
We're pleased it's still moving forward, and your help, everybody, it really has helped. To your question, Senator Hogan, Churches United used to have a churches council of 100 churches that all worked together and helped to fund Churches United. About 4 or 5 years ago, the system kind of divided itself away from that, had their own board of directors and went into their own function, and COVID came along. They dropped all their volunteers because the rules were the volunteers couldn't work for them. When they dropped their volunteers, their monthly cost went from $125,000 to $250,000. When COVID money ran out again in 2021, there wasn't a readjustment. There should have been a readjustment and bring the churches back. So the new director, the new reverend that's taken over, realizes that, has dropped operating costs from $250,000 to $150,000, going to $125,000. We are going to have a meeting next Monday. Bernie Dardis and I are going to be there. The mayors are going to be there with the church leaders to talk about, let's get re-engaged. Let's get the volunteers re-engaged. Let's get the churches re-engaged to help that out. Rumor was it was going to close November 30th. They now have got enough funding to go to December 30th, and they're going to do a big push over the Christmas holidays for a fund drive to see what they can do. On Monday, we're going to kick off a press conference and say, here's what we need, here's how we need help on this. There is no question if it goes down, that's 120 households, Jolly Time kids, and children and mothers are in that setting. And they have another unit that's 80 units that are just people in apartments. So the state of Minnesota then next year will fund it. So we just have to really get them to the hump, through the hump over the winter to get them to Minnesota funding. The next financial model then will be one that's sustainable with Minnesota money. And some people have asked me to move it to Fargo. I'm not going to do that, okay? So that's not a viable option. It works very well where it is, but the churches have to get re-engaged and the volunteers. And that's really what's going to come out as a question. Commissioner Pepper.
So, Mr. Chair, just to change topics while Steve is still up there. Steve, can I ask you for a favor? Could we have a list of the number of the water systems that are in and the potential ones that are having a challenge because they can't afford it? It's just for the legislators so they know who's in and who's out so far. I think that'd be good. And then they can start working on how to help those smaller systems, because this isn't an ask for Fargo. We're in, and we know it's awesome, but it's for the small systems, because 20 and 50 years from now, that's their economic lifeline. And so that's, to me, that's the key, if that's okay. And I'm sure you already have it, but I think that'd be great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
You're on.
Any other questions? Oh, you wanted, your thing.
We wanted you to tell us.
Oh,
who's
right.
in, who's out.
So right now, that's a really tough question to answer explicitly, but we have 30 systems that are still in play. Of those, 7 have signed up. So we have Fargo, Grand Forks, Mayville, Hillsboro, Valley City, Carrington, and Cooperstown have all signed on the dotted line. And then we have the remaining 23 systems that are positive that we think will still likely participate as a result of the 2016 user outreach efforts that we had. We have had 6 systems that have declined. Most of those are either small systems or systems that think they have sufficient water for the long term. I'll do my best to articulate those 2 off the top of my head. South Central Water out of Bismarck, who actually has 3 ways to get to the Missouri River already. we were thinking they might want some water in that Washburn area, and they declined. Central Plains out of Fezzen, which is a small rural water system, decided that they had sufficient water. Greater Ramsey out of Devil's Lake decided that the project was too far away for them to make it effective. Little Macville has decided that they no longer want to participate. And then, one that we're a little bit concerned about is Stutzman Rural Water out of Jamestown. And somebody mentioned Jamestown earlier. Their big concern, and it's a very conservative part of the state, but their big concern is putting the costs on their existing water meters for speculative use that they would need down in the future. But that's the other one that's declined. And then the revelation we had at the beginning of this year, and we're a little bit embarrassed probably, we should have been out in front of the counties a year or two ago explaining the importance of this project. But one of our former board members for Garrison made the connection. And so we've been hitting the counties really, really hard. And the project's been very well received as a way to complement the rural water districts and the general funds that the counties are able to get. And so I do think we have probably 7 counties that are already expressing interest in addition to that 30. And then we need to do a better job of engaging the northeast counties, and we haven't been able to do that yet. So that number could even go up to 40 or more when we're all said and done. And I have a really nice map that could have articulated all this. I just don't have it with me.
Too bad you didn't have the map. Yeah, that was a nice one too. The other question we had of the group here, that I have you all here today, this large of a group, and when you get busy with legislative session, is it hard to have a meeting or in crossover, or is there times in which are better or worse for you if we tried to get together sometime during the session? Is it better for us to come out to Bismarck and try to meet with you all at a pace? Ron?
I think a lot would express this, but crossover's a break we deserve. So I try to avoid any meeting possible.
You tried to.
Wanted something, do it before or after on a Saturday. I'm not being greedy, but it's our, and a lot of people fly out of town for those 4
That's your time, crossover?
It's just a poor time. It's
okay.
The time we catch up with our families and stuff.
I don't want to interfere with your taxes, Judy. Yeah, okay. And does it sometimes make sense to come to Bismarck and try to meet with you on an evening or something? Does that make sense?
It's easier for us. Mayor, the name, you list the names of all the individuals and the contacts. Are those numbers that they can be reached at evenings and on weekends? Or are they just the office ones? I just want to make sure that, anytime, because things move rapidly and we may need to get a hold of you. So I'm just asking about those.
Yeah, we'll change that because mine is the office and nobody's there after 5. So yes, absolutely.
Oh, thank you.
Everybody else is okay? Those are your standard phones?
Dave, you're.
Yeah.
Mayor, one more thing that might be helpful is to send us the names and telephone numbers of the people who presented today so that if we have questions during hearings, we can contact them. And the PowerPoints too.
Yes,
Yeah,
we'll do that.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Strand.
I just want to thank you all for coming. The situation and relationships we have here, the rest of the world would wish to have what we have going on, with the ability to know each other, to communicate with each other, to have each other on speed dial, to have this dialogue. I just thank you very sincerely, because we have a lot of work to do together, and we need your help, and we hope we can deliver for you as well. So that's just a big.
I will warn you, Commissioner Kolpak doesn't answer her phone if she's driving. She's in front of me and I call her and she won't answer. So that'll be the one time.
And you just read my notes, Commissioner Strand. I wanted to also add my thanks. This relationship is unique even across North Dakota, that we get together, the local and the representatives. Congratulations to the new electeds as well. And I want to just kind of close to Representative Swantek's earlier point. We work very closely with the League of Cities. We have a fabulous lobbying team as well. So we're very active, as you know, during the legislative session. But I also want to give kudos to the staff, the management and leadership team, and every department director, as we make these really important decisions around complex issues. And for instance, homelessness is really a complex issue with a lot of moving parts. Let's do it with facts and data, and this team has the facts and data, so really rely on us for any questions you have. Thank you for being here.
Just a couple of things. There was a short discussion about had a bill drafted. You all don't have to draft the bills. I mean, the cities can have their attorneys and do it. But if we have the ideas about what has to be done, if what the goals are of the issue, then one of the legislators can work with legislative counsel to get it drafted. Don't worry about the whereases. But you tell us, whomever it might be, and some of us are a little overloaded, so we'd appreciate your sharing with somebody else sometimes. But the basic nut of the bill, and then the details can be worked out. But the LC people will visit with whomever the experts are that are going to help us put it together. So don't worry about that part. I also wanted to mention that we're going to be building a new state hospital for those with serious mental illnesses, and that will be really important as part of the things that are creating some issues for us as well. And we're getting closer to having all of that resolved. That in another month should be easier to do. So anyway, we'll look forward to that. And I don't speak for everybody here, but I will in this case. I really appreciate your calling this. Thank you to Mayor Dargis for being here as well. I wish he had been at the table, but anyway, next time. But we appreciate having the opportunity to get together as well, and we want you to know that we are available also. The emails, you know how to get a hold of us. Most people do. So thank you very much for this morning's effort, and you had a very nice little breakfast.
Thank you. Austin?
I just wanted to say, last session was an absolute terrific session for Cass County. You look at the diversion project, the amount of money there. You look at the Red River Water Supply Project, the amount of money there. You look at the 2 buildings at NDSU, and we did terrific. So we have to be very careful strategically on our asks in the future. We have to continue to build relationships with those out in the middle of the state and the western part of the state, and I think the Chamber of Commerce is doing a phenomenal job in doing that. And then we can push the accelerator when we need to do that. We have a great representation out in Bismarck. We have 11 districts now. That's 33 legislators. So when we want to, we can push, but we want to be very, very careful about that and continue to build relationships. And I know there's a significant amount of people in Bismarck in the legislature that have family in Cass County. It's mostly West Fargo, but it's Cass County.
Oh, come on now.
So we have great connections. We just have to continue to work on that.
I hope Bernie didn't hear that. Oh, sorry. Any other comments? Go to the order. Well, there's piles of treats in the back if you take some for staff or somebody back home or whatever, try to grab some on your way out. But we very much appreciate everybody here today and appreciate all you do for us as a city and as a county. It's just fantastic, and we very much appreciate that. And I do feel that you're really a force to be reckoned with. We now have a group of people that are very concerned about our community and our people, and that's what we've always really wanted. So I appreciate all the hard work you do, and keep up the good work. Thank you.